Rupert Wainwright was known for directing rap videos in the early 90s, and most closely associated with the artist MC Hammer. However, he was beginning to delve more into the mainstream, which directly led to him directing the childhood fantasy film Blank Check. Director? Rupert Wainwright.
This is where we segue into Blank Check. I got asked to do, so he wrote a song for the Addams Family called the Addams Family Groove. And the Addams Family Groove was used as not just as a song in the movie, but the music video itself was a trailer for the movie, if you see what I mean. In other words, it ran in theaters. So we did that, and we also did this big music video called Too Legit to Quit, which was one of the most insane projects ever. Anyway, so we did that, and I remember I was having lunch at Musso and Frank's, no more storied lunch spot in Hollywood. And I was having lunch there, and somebody who I barely knew came over to me and said, "Are you Rupert Wainwright?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "You did the Addams Family Groove, yeah?" I said, Yeah. And he goes, "Oh my God, here's my business card. You got to send me a VHS tape of that today. I'll send a messenger, but I need to get it for Jeffrey Katzenberg because his kids really want a copy of it." I'm like, no sooner said than done, sir. So I sent it over, and the next thing I know, my agent calls me and says, "Katzenberg wants you to do a movie at Disney." I'm like, okay. So like any self-respecting rap director, doing a movie at Disney was pretty low on the list of street cred things to do. And at the same time, there was this movie at TriStar, which was dark and weird and fucked up, and I really wanted to do that. But they kind of were leaning towards somebody else. So I'm like, well, the only way to get hired in this town is to have someone else want to hire you. So my agent told the TriStar guys, Disney's going to hire him. And they were like, okay, well, whatever. So I really wanted the TriStar movie. In the meantime, Disney sent me Blank Check. The honest truth is, it wasn't really my cup of tea, right? At the time, I was doing like pretty edgy stuff, right? And this to me struck me as pretty fluffy. And I think it's just the arrogance of where I was at that time. But I really wanted this TriStar movie. So that didn't happen. I walked into the Disney meeting to be interviewed for a film I didn't want to do. They asked me, "Why do you like this?" I said, "It's great. It's like child porn." Like, what? I said, well, pornography is basically the illusion of having something that you'll never really get, but in a way that's realistic enough to do the job. And that's kind of what this is for kids. They imagine they're a millionaire for a while. And they're like, okay, we get it. And basically the guy looked me in the eye and said, "I'm offering you this movie. Are you going to do it?" And put his hand across the table and said, "Shake, let's make this movie." And I shook it going, oh, fuck, I don't even want to do it. And so then I rushed back. I called my agent. He goes, "Just take it. Fuck TriStar. They'll never make their mind up." And in true mission, at this point, Disney was they were doing these $10 million movies, and Katzenberg was making like 12 of them a year, as well as like the $50 million movies, right? So they would like hire someone once a month, someone would get a Disney movie. But it was low budget for then. I mean, it would, for a studio movie, $10 million is still low budget. You know what I mean? For an indie movie, obviously, it's a huge budget. But so very simply, they offered it to me. I said yes, no, maybe. They said yes. I said yes, and TriStar couldn't make their mind up, and I ended up making that movie. So that's how I got to make Blank Check. That's how I got to be hired to make Blank Check. Making Blank Check was a totally different experience.
Blank Check stars Brian Bonsall, who was better known as Worf's kid on TNG. This child gets a hold of a $1 million check from a gangster and uses it to buy the best things that life has to offer a kid: toys, ice cream, and your own limo driver.
And I hate to sound like a total whore, but once you get going, it's like you want to do a great job. Do you know what I mean? It could be a wedding video. You still want to do a great job, right? So I'm not saying Blank Check was a wedding video. It's not nearly that good. But what I'm saying is like you get into the nuts and bolts. So like we're going to shoot this scene, and like, can we have a crane here? We can't have a crane. Okay, can we if we have a steady? Oh, we can't. You know. So you just get into the nuts and bolts of it. The hardest thing was casting, and I was under the illusion that Katzenberg is like, it's a $10 million movie. We make a bunch of them. Some of them hit, some of them don't. We don't even know anyway. So off we go. And we were really, really trying to shoot in the summer, because when you have kids, you have quite strict rules. And if the kid is in summer holidays, they still can't do a lot of hours in a row, but they don't have to go to school as well. When you're in the fall, when school has started, not only can they only work so many hours, they also have to go to school as well. So instead of having them like 6 working hours a day, suddenly you now have them like 4, 3.5 working hours a day. So we were trying to get going and shoot in the summer. Katzenberg wouldn't sign off on any actor to be the lead. I shot video tests. I shot film tests of some kids. Kept on going on. And Katzenberg was like, no, don't approve. Keep on looking. Anyway, eventually we found the Brian Bonsall, and he approved him. So off we went. By now, it was already midsummer. So by the time we started shooting, I think we had 2 weeks of shooting in the summer, and then halfway through, suddenly we were shooting in in school time. So that was pretty brutal. Like you'd be shooting a scene, and you'd go 1 take, 2 take, and it's just getting to the groove. You'd turn around, and then you'd turn back again, and the kid wasn't there. And you go, what the fucking kid? Let's get him back to set. Let's shoot. We're ready. You go, he's in school. Back in an hour. Let's shoot another angle, and we'll come back to this. So instead of like shooting out each angle at a time, you were constantly breaking things down, shooting a different angle with an actor who had the lines being read to them by a continuity girl. And then, then the actor would come back and you'd break everything down and relight it for that, and everyone had kind of forgotten how it had done by then. And I do not recommend that system. So rule number 1 of filmmaking, if you are making a film with a child, make sure you're shooting it in the summer holidays where they don't have to go to school, because it's already hard enough. Wisdom from the bottom. Had a production designer that I hated. I'm not even going to mention his name. He's turned out to do very well. But we built the inside of the castle as a set. So we found this castle in Austin. And we're like, oh my God. So this castle in the middle of like a residential area. And so it was great. The castle literally is an old water station, which when it was built probably was in the middle of like a big empty prairie or something. And it was built like that. And then as urban sprawl spread out, it became the suburbs. So it's literally, 10 minutes drive from the center of Austin. It is really like that on the outside. It's not really like that on the inside any longer. So we then built the inside on a stage in a warehouse in Austin. And so it was all stone, right? So we told, the production designer did all the sketches and whatever. And then we came onto set one day to look at it. And he had made the whole floor out of rough stone. So normally you would paint that, right? You'd get a scenic to paint it so it looked like rough stone. But when you're doing that, you have a perfectly smooth warehouse floor. So when you're doing a dolly shot, you just push the dolly. You don't have to lay track. You can do complex moves. Like the DP, who was Bill Pope, who'd done The Matrix, for Christ's sake, or did it later on. He was like, what the hell? You got a stone, not just a stone floor, but an irregular stone floor? Like, you can twist your ankle just walking on this without thing. I can't ever move the camera here without laying down track and board and everything. And the production designer was like, well, it's done now. I'm not changing it now. He was a cunt. And that's it. I don't want to talk about him any longer because I don't. But Bill Pope, almost lost it. At one point, just moving the camera from one position to another, not rolling, just moving it from one point to another, the lens was shaken so badly, it lost internal focus. In other words, the elements of the lens got kind of nudged, just bumped over this fucking ground. Inside, on a set. Yeah, I remember one time we were shooting 6-day weeks in the middle of summer in Austin, and we had like a party on set. Like we come to the end of Saturday night, at the end of one 6-day week, and we had some beers on set, and we just all had a bit of a rager. And I was so angry with the production designer. There was this like deer's head, like a mounted deer's head. In my anger against him, I took it off the wall and I smashed it against the set wall, and it went straight through. And then we all just ran away. And next Monday, the production designer sent a purple memo out to everybody going, blah, 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 blah. I can't have this. And, we're like, who the hell did that? Someone had a Polaroid of me doing it or something like that. It was a little awkward. It was a tough shoot, man. Listen, it's a tough shoot. I mean, filming I find quite hard anyway, to be honest. I love doing it, but I do find it quite hard.
The film also stars Tone Loc, who had a hell of a run in the 90s outside of his hit songs, Fern Gully, Bebe's Kids, and Ace Ventura. And now he was the bumbling baddie Juice in Blank Check. Wainwright remembers him being a great guy, but Loc was running into some issues on set.
Tone was a very cool guy. I mean, I did one video for Tone Loc that almost bankrupted me. There was a song he did called Got It Going On. And somehow the budget just got out of whack. And I ended up spending it was a $50,000 video, and I think we spent $90,000 on it. And it was largely my fault. We shot it in the Bahamas. We shot it at a concert in LA, and it was a terrible video. I don't know what it was. It was just a mess. And we went over budget, and it was miserable, and everybody hated everybody. I don't know whether that was before. I think I hired Tone after that, because I think I already knew him by the time I hired him for the movie. Tone ended up not really liking the kid very much, which is okay because he didn't have many scenes with him, and the ones that he did, he wasn't supposed to like him. I do remember Tone losing it with Brian Bonsall one time, and Brian was kind of nagging him or something, and Tone just picked him up by the scruff of his front and put him up against the wall. I don't want to say slammed, because I don't think he slammed him against the wall, but anytime somebody that much bigger picks you up by your shirt and places you against the wall, you kind of feel it was a slam. And we were all a little shocked by that. We're like, oh, you can't do that because that kid's pissing me off. I'm like, no, he pisses us off too, but we can't pick him up and throw him against the wall. Luckily, it was a set, so, anyway. Tone's a very sweet, gentle guy. He's, he's definitely a blunt head. Oh, that was a funny story. Oh my God. So listen to this, right? What happened was, shortly before shooting the movie, I went with my girlfriend to Universal City when they just opened up the new big part. When I say the new big part, what you now think of as Universal City Walk, right? And they had these dancing fountains. And the dancing fountain, have you seen them? The waters go up in a sequence and kids run around in the middle, right? And I'm like, wow, that would be the perfect set piece for the date, right? And so I called the producer. I said, I just saw these things. Can we work that into the movie? And he goes, yeah. I mean, if we can, we can. But I don't know where there are other dancing fountains in the world. We're shooting it in Austin. So either it's in Austin or they'll make it or whatever. It's a tight budget. So I called the production manager and I said, God, the producer loves this. I love this. And he's like, I don't know where we're going to find a dancing fountain thing. So I called up the company that did it. I tracked them down. I said, do you have any other ones? He goes, yeah, we're all over America. I'm like, great. Do you have one in Austin? No, don't have one in Austin. We have one in Dallas. I'm like, great. So I called the producer, called the thing, and I explained it all, and I explained to the writers, and the writers go, yeah, we love this too. So the studio loved it. Everybody loved it. So it was written into the movie. That was one of my sole creative adds to the film, to the script, I should say. And then they said, well, Dallas isn't that far. We'll kind of finish the shoot, and we'll move to Dallas for 2 nights, and then we'll all come home. So we get to Dallas, which is not that far from Austin, and we have Brian and Duff on that date, and he's going to take her there. And then we have the three bad guys who are going to chase them, and they're going to get caught in the water. Okay? We have 2 nights to shoot this, and we have the choreography of the water, and we can't get the kids wet before the this and that, and the kid can only shoot till 11:30 at night, and I mean, there's all these different rules, right? We have 2 nights to do it in the last 2 days of the show, and I'm going to do this bit first, and then Tone, I'm going to be shooting some of him on the first night and some of him on the second night. And we're on the set, and the security guy comes, and he's a Dallas cop, and he's a motorcycle cop, so he's got those kind of flared breeches, you know what I mean? You know, with the boots that come up to the knee and everything. And he's got a huge gun on his hip, a pistol, but it's like silvery white, silver-ish. And I noticed that it is cocked. The hammer is back. And I pointed that out to him. I said, just FYI, that, you know, we're shooting a kids movie here, and the hammer of your pistol is cocked. And he goes, yep, that reduces my reaction time by 0.23 seconds. I'm like, is our life really hanging on that sort of a fraction of a second? is that what we're facing? Anyway, so he was nice enough, and until he met Tone. And Tone was, as always, smoking a blunt. And so about half an hour after shooting, the producer comes up to him and says, so Tone's going home tonight. I said, no, he's not. He's actually shooting tomorrow as well. And he goes, you're not listening. Tone is going home tonight. So you better shoot whatever you need of Tone tonight, because he ain't going to be here tomorrow. Or we won't be here tomorrow. Okay? See you later. And basically he'd smoked the blunt in front of said cop, who then said, I don't want to know this guy. I don't want him here any longer. And so, anyway, so we shot Tone out that night. We rearranged the schedule. Tone went home. So that was, by then it was like the end of the show. I was like, I don't care what happens, you know. We were kind of happy. I was like, movie's almost done. This last scene was like, I love this last scene. You know what I mean? I was really happy to be in something just visual and fun and sort of beautiful and poetic and goofy all at once. And you know, so I was happy. I wasn't happy to see Tone go so early, but you just, that shit comes at you, you know, left and right.
Not too long ago on the internet, there was an uproar about the kiss scene between Preston and the much older Agent Shay Stanley. Wainwright had the following to say about that.
Disney, oh yeah, no, they loved that. It was very sweet and very innocent. Yeah, no, they loved all that. No, they thought it was cool. I mean, he's like, I can't remember exactly how old he is, but I guess he's like 12 or 11 or something. He has a crush on this, you know, older woman. It's like having a crush on your grade school teacher. You know what I mean? It's very sweet and very innocent. They didn't have any problem with that.
That's how Blank Check is generally remembered. But according to Wainwright, it could have been something much, much worse.
The other funny story is this. I'm going to use... This was a funny story, okay? It wasn't a funny story at all. This was a weird story. But it's also like a story about Hollywood. So we were in the process of trying to cast the movie. So the movie was kind of blinking green light. So you've got a start date, you've got a budget, you're making the movie. I'm working on it full time. But you're not really making the movie because you don't have your lead actor yet. Do you see what I mean? And it's a rolling, you know, start date. And so we're crewing up, and everybody's like, yeah, what? And everything's kind of like moving, but it's like the beginning of before a relay race starts. You know what I mean? And so one day the producer says to me, oh, there's a guy coming in. I want you to meet him. He's going to be your second AD. I said, but we haven't picked a first AD yet. Normally the first AD brings on their person as a second. He goes, well, not in this case. Just meet him. I said, what? I don't get it. Why am I meeting the second AD? Because the first AD will want to bring on his own second. He goes, let me explain. His aunt is the head of business affairs at Disney. We're hiring this guy, okay? We could all do with having some friends in high places. Got it? I'm like, okay. So in comes this guy, and let's just call him Steve. And Steve comes in, and he's like, please, I just want to work really hard. I'll be the hardest working guy on set. You have no idea how I would just, you know, I'd appreciate the chance, and I love film. And I'm like, what the nicest guy in the world. And so normally you have 2 seconds anyway. You have like a set second and then whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I said, fine, no problem, all good. Sorry I even reacted that way. And then we're on set and we're shooting the first day, and somehow we wanted to shoot a scene. I at the last minute wanted to shoot a scene with the kid on the bicycle, which wasn't scheduled until the next day. And so the props people didn't have the bicycle on set. And I'm like, God damn it, why don't we just carry the bicycle with us? It's like a $25 item. And I'm like, the light is perfect in the scene. And God, goes, give me 5 minutes. And he runs into someone's yard, talks to the homeowners and says, can I borrow your bicycle? Thank you very much. Here's $20. I'll be back in half an hour. Comes with the bicycle and goes, will this work? I'm like, it's great. So then we had to buy the bicycle from the homeowners and get 3 doubles of them and whatever, because we established the bike, right? And I'm like, I love this guy. I think I already said his name, but let's go back to calling him Steve. So anyway, yeah, you'll see why in a bit. So everything goes great, and I'm like, this guy is just so helpful. So when we're in the middle of getting ready for the party scene, or the scene when they're attacked, or some version of that, one of the prop guys comes to me and says, just want to check one thing. I didn't see it in the script, and I didn't see it in the breakdowns, but where is the scene with the Uzi submachine gun? I said, ha, 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 ha. And he goes, no. I've seen an Uzi submachine gun on set, so obviously I'm assuming it's a prop. I didn't know about it, but is it being written into the script? I said, no, there's no Uzi submachine gun. It's a Disney kids movie. There's no guns on set, even for the bad guys. And he goes, so why is there an Uzi submachine gun on set? And I say, I don't know why there's an Uzi submachine gun. Where did you see it? He goes, well, Steve is over on the corner there polishing it. It didn't look very much like a prop, but I assumed it was a prop. And sometimes you can have not prop ones, but dummy ones, which are like real guns, but there's no firing pin or whatever, so they don't look plastic. And he goes, I call the first AD up. I go, Steve is polishing a submachine gun on set. And by this time, Steve and the first AD had kind of fallen out. Exactly because, as I predicted, because if the first AD doesn't bring on their own second AD, it's kind of like the DP brings on his own focus puller. You know what I mean? His own gaffer. That's their team. And so this guy had been kind of sidelined. And somebody, the producer, went over to him and said, you give me that gun. And the gun went away, and Steve went away, and we never saw them again. He literally took an Uzi submachine gun onto set. That was the guy I didn't want to hire. And then the other thing is Disney was famously intrusive at that time. They would watch dailies and they'd call you back up and they'd go, we didn't like this scene, reshoot it. And you'd go, well, what's wrong with it? It's just there's no feeling, or it's not funny enough. Reshoot it. And I would never get those calls. It would come to the producer, and the producer would, go, dude, it's Disney. You just reshoot it. So there would be that. But I'll give you an example of the way Disney worked then. Okay. So back then you were editing on film. And so you're cutting something, and you have the negative, of course, stays at the laboratory, and you print out one copy of. So the other thing about it is I don't know how much you know about this, but like you would maybe shoot 8 takes, but you would only print 3. You would print the 3 that you liked the most. So there would be the negative of 8, which you filmed, but then you would only print out the select ones. And if you're Clint Eastwood, you do 2 takes and you print 1 and you move on. And so if you're everybody else, you do as many takes as you can and you print a couple of them. So when you're cutting in the cutting room, the film is going through the bench. You can make more copies of that, but you only have 1 copy of it at that point. So there was one scene when the father, which is not due to me at all. It was just really well written. The father is talking to what he thinks is Mr. McIntosh, but in fact is Preston sitting in the chair. And it's almost a monologue, right? Because the father is talking to him and he's not talking back. And so it's like the father talking and explaining how he hasn't paid enough attention to Preston. Everybody kind of really liked the scene. And one of the higher-up executives, I think he was the head of Disney, technically. Obviously, above him was Hoberman, who was in charge of Buena Vista, and above him was Katzenberg. But this guy who was head of Walt Disney Pictures, right? He didn't like the scene. He thought it could be better. And he didn't just want to see another version. He wanted to see 3 different versions, which meant that the editor would cut it one way, it would be sent to the lab, they would then videotape it, then it would come back, he would recut it another way, send it to the lab, videotape that, come back. So it's a 3-day process. Cut it another way, and then send it to the lab, and then finally you would have 3 different ways of looking at the scene on videotape over the Christmas holidays. That's the way that Disney used to work. And you know, you would have and then you'd look at all 3 and you'd go, you know, I think it's better the way it is. Just leave it. And you'd go, okie dokie. I mean, I wasn't actually personally doing the videotaping of it, so it wasn't like it was a huge hassle for me. But it was just very weird. That's the way they would operate. You know what they used to call Disney? They used to call it Mauschwitz, like Auschwitz, but with a mouse. And the other joke about it is they would say, the line about Disney is, if you don't want to work 6 days a week, don't bother working 7 either. Like you'd get calls. I mean, you'd come into the studio. It's Sunday morning. Yeah, I'll see you here in an hour. We're all getting around and meeting. We're going through 2 or 3 of these scenes. We're not happy with them yet. It was literally like a 7-day-a-week thing on a $10 million movie. You know what I mean? It's not like we were doing Heaven's Gate and everyone was like had $100 million in their life's career doing it. They were doing like 12 of these a year. I mean, remember, alongside of this, the next movie in production was like Cabin Boy with David Letterman and a monkey or something. Do you know what I mean? So this was literally like one of the sausages in the factory. And then I remember one horrific time when we were in post-production. When we tested the movie first off, it tested really well. So suddenly everybody got very into the movie. And of course, the more they got into the movie, the more notes we got. So the more notes we got, the worse the movie tested. And I remember it was after the LA earthquake when we did the last test. And I flew in the private plane, the Disney corporate jet, with 4 people to Arizona so we could test it in Arizona. And then we flew right back. And the numbers, the test numbers were phoned into the pilot and given to Katzenberg, on the plane ride back. And they were yet again even lower. And, as a corporate jet, it's not like, you're rolling with Jay-Z. There's 4 people in a thing that takes 8. Everyone's quite close. And you're not sitting in rows, you're sitting facing each other. And Katzenberg is reading the Wall Street Journal, and the numbers come in, and he looks at them and goes, and there's silence. And I go, what are the numbers? And he goes, yeah, you got a 78. And before, maybe it was a 78, maybe it was a 72 or something, right? And the first test had been an 89 or something. And, or maybe even a 92. I can't remember. It had tested very well, high 80s, low 90s, and now it was testing low 70s. And this was the 4th cut of the movie. And there's a pause. And he's reading the Wall Street Journal. And I go, listen, I know it's my first film, and I know you make films a lot, and I know they're all do really well, but can I just point something out? Every time we test the movie, it scores lower and lower and lower. Can we not retest the movie the first cut and see if that's testing high? Or maybe it was just a fluke. I don't know, but can we try it? He doesn't look up from his newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, mark you, and he then just very curtly, politely, but shortly just says, you're talking to a guy who doesn't believe in the numbers. Now, there's one thing I don't believe about Jeffrey Katzenberg, is that he doesn't believe in the numbers. So anyway, super smart guy, very polite, first-time director trying to get his nose in there. He didn't smack me down. But I was like, all right, it is what it is. And it came out, and it was number 3 when it opened, which wasn't bad. But it came out against this little movie with a new actor called Jim Carrey called Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. And that took the weekend. And that was the big news of the weekend, because there was this new actor that no one had really seen unless you'd watched In Living Color, right? And that was, all the news was about that weekend, about that movie. And it did perform much better than anyone expected. So the movie did good. I don't think it was a huge hit. I was slightly embarrassed by it. Because, like I said, I wanted to be doing darker movies. Stigmata for me is an example of a movie that it's pretty close to exactly what I wanted to do with that movie, you know? So Blank Check wasn't exactly where I wanted to like end up as a filmmaker. Anyway, I went off on like a 3-week holiday to like, I don't know, all sorts of exotic places, and I came back, and it was just, by the time I got back, it was like, it's done, it's over. And so Disney would send me for about a year all these kids' movies. At one point, they offered me $1 million, and my going rate then was $150,000. Right? That was like DGA minimum. That's what I got paid for the first one. It offered me $1 million to do this movie about, I don't know, fat kids in camp or something. I remember talking to my agent, going, I can't do this, man. I just can't do it. He goes, then don't do it. I said, what happens if I turn this down? He goes, well, they'll never offer you another movie, but it's okay. Well, there's other studios. And I had a lot of other music video work, and I was like, you know what? I did one. It's okay. It's cool. You know, I just don't want to do like again and again and again. And so I turned that one down. I don't know if it was ever made or not. And I started trying to do other kind of films. Meanwhile, I was like paying the way by doing a lot of music videos, a lot of commercials and everything. So it wasn't like I wasn't busy. So for about a decade, like I'm going, yeah, Blank Check. Yeah, okay, fine. You know, like I'm not dissing it, but I'm not like, you know, whatever. So cut to 20 years later, okay? I don't know when the movie came out. When was it? Like 92 or something? Like I remember I'm like on a plane, and every time you're going alone on a plane, you're always hoping, you know, if it's a business trip and someone else is paying for it, and you're in business class, you're always hoping like, you know, the next Cindy Crawford is going to be sitting next to you in business. And of course it never is. So I always get stuck with the whiny kid. So I'm sitting there, and there's this kid beside me, and he's got a really hot mum who's like 2 rows over. And he goes, what do you do? What do you do? I'm like, I'm a director. What are you doing? I'm like, Blank Check. And he goes, what? He goes, Mom, he directed Blank Check. So then I realized there was like a new generation of people watching this movie. So there's this whole bizarre, not whole bizarre generation, but there's a whole generation of people who are like maybe half my age who've seen the movie and I like love it. I can't include in that group my children who I can barely force at gunpoint to watch the damn thing. But it's kind of like got this weird, I don't know, it's like it's the legs on the movie were much longer, I think, than anybody expected. Let's just put it that way. Which proves that it is, in fact, kiddie porn. Meanwhile, all my friends of my own age would just taunt me mercilessly about the movie. Like I had one friend who for 10 years in a row would find a laser disc of Blank Check that was remaindered or returned and give it to me as a birthday present. Literally, it had to be returned, or it had to be sale, or 90% off, or you know what I mean? It wasn't just like a brand new, you know what I mean? It was like from the odd bins of returned laser discs. I'm like, yeah, thank you very much. You know, so I don't really know how to honestly answer the question, did I enjoy making Blank Check? I was happy I was making a studio movie. Sometimes I got to do something close to what I wanted to do. But I have to say, overall, listen, I've had worse experiences.